The general had survived 3 wars, 2 assassination attempts, and more battlefield surgeries than any man should ever endure, yet as the hospital doors slid open that night, he felt a fear he had never known before, a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with the shrapnel lodged dangerously close to his heart. Because this time his life depended not on strategy or soldiers but on a single surgeon he had personally demanded to see, the hospital's very best, the one whose hands were rumored to be steadier than machines and whose decisions saved lives others had already written off. And as he lay on the gurney surrounded by rushing nurses, for lines swinging and monitors screaming, his voice cut through the chaos with authority that still commanded obedience. "Get me your top surgeon, now," and the staff froze for half a second because they all knew exactly who that was. Yet none of them were prepared for what would happen when she arrived. As the general was wheeled into the operating prep room, memories began clawing their way to the surface, memories he had buried beneath medals and promotions, because pain had a way of loosening secrets, and with every heartbeat echoing in his ears, he remembered a different hospital, decades earlier, dust in the air, gunfire outside, and a young civilian surgeon standing her ground while he, then a colonel, made a decision that would change both their lives forever. A decision he had never apologized for, never admitted was wrong. And now fate had brought him back to the same crossroads, except this time he was the one bleeding, the one powerless, the one waiting for someone else to decide if he would live or die. And when the doors finally opened and footsteps entered the room, he turned his head, expecting gray hair, a man with decades etched into his face, but instead he saw her, standing calm and composed in surgical scrubs, eyes sharp, posture unshaken. And in that instant the general froze, his breath catching as if the past had punched him in the chest harder than any enemy ever had, because the woman walking toward him was not just the hospital's top surgeon, she was the very person he had once destroyed with a single command, and she recognized him too, though her face showed nothing, not shock, not anger, not fear, only professional focus, as if he were just another patient, but inside her chest a storm was raging, because she had spent years rebuilding her life from the ashes he left behind, years proving herself in operating rooms where failure meant death, years earning respect in a system that once tried to erase her, and now here he was, the man whose order had cost her everything, lying helpless on her table, trusting her hands without even knowing if she would accept the case, and the room seemed to shrink as the weight of their shared history pressed in. The nurses unaware they were standing between 2 lives forever entwined by a choice made long ago, and as she reviewed his scans, her voice steady as steel, she delivered the truth without mercy. "You have minutes, not hours. The shrapnel is unstable. Any delay and you won't make it." And the general swallowed hard, realizing for the first time in his career that rank meant nothing here, that the power he once wielded so easily was useless now, and with a humility he had never shown before, he asked quietly, "Can you save me?" And she paused, just long enough for him to feel the weight of every decision he had ever made, before answering, "That depends on whether you trust me." And in that moment, viewers listening to this story would feel the tension tighten like a wire, because this wasn't just a surgery, it was a reckoning, a test of character, and a reminder that no matter how powerful you become, life always finds a way to balance the scales. And if you're feeling the intensity of this moment, if stories like this grip you and stay with you long after the video ends, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now, because what happens next will change everything, not just for the general, but for the surgeon who now holds his fate in her hands, as the operating lights blaze to life and the past and present collide in a single, irreversible moment. The operating room hummed with controlled urgency as the lights burned bright and machines took over the rhythm of the general's failing body, yet beneath the sterile calm lay a battlefield far more dangerous than any he had ever commanded, because every movement of the surgeon's hands carried not just technical precision but the weight of a past neither of them could escape. And as anesthesia pulled him into darkness, fragments of memory surfaced uninvited, faces of soldiers, civilians, and finally hers, younger then, standing defiant in a makeshift field hospital years ago when he had ordered an evacuation under fire and labeled her non-essential, leaving her behind with wounded patients she refused to abandon, a decision that ended her military career, destroyed her reputation, and nearly cost her life, yet she survived, rebuilt, and rose through sheer skill and resilience to become the surgeon now leaning over him, scalpel steady, voice calm as she guided her team through the most delicate procedure of her career, removing shrapnel millimeter by millimeter from a man whose single order had once shattered her world, and as complications emerged, unexpected bleeding, dropping vitals, alarms piercing the air, the room tensed. Because this was the moment lesser surgeons would hesitate, but she did not, her hands moving with ruthless clarity. Shutting out emotion, shutting out memory, because lives were saved here, not judged, and when the anesthesiologist warned they were losing him, she made a decision no textbook would recommend, one that could either save him or end everything, and as silence fell except for her measured commands, the surgery became a test not of skill alone but of character, and when at last the final suture was placed and the monitors stabilized, the room exhaled collectively, knowing they had witnessed something extraordinary. Hours later the general awoke in recovery, weaker than he had ever been, stripped of rank and armor, only to find her standing at the foot of his bed reviewing charts, and for the first time since that long-ago war zone, he spoke not as a commander but as a man, his voice breaking as he said her name, acknowledged what he had done, confessed that his decision had haunted him for years though pride had kept him silent, and she listened without interrupting, without satisfaction, without anger, because she had already won the battle that mattered most by becoming who she was despite him, and when he finished, she simply said, "I didn't save you for an apology, I saved you because that's who I am," a truth that hit harder than any reprimand ever could, and in that moment the general understood that real power was not authority or command but integrity. And as news of the surgery spread through the hospital and beyond, the legend shifted, not of a general saved, but of a surgeon who rose above injustice and chose professionalism over revenge, a story that reminds every viewer watching that the past does not define you unless you let it, that resilience is the loudest form of justice, and that sometimes the greatest victories happen in silence. And if this story moved you, if it made you reflect on power, forgiveness, and strength, then don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel, because stories like this aren't just entertainment, they are lessons wrapped in emotion, and the next one might change the way you see the world just as deeply.